Want to know which survivors you should buy and level up first? Well, in today's video, you're about to find out. What's going on, guys? Sharpshot here. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So for today's video, we'll be going over which DBD survivors you should be prestiging first. With Christmas and the holidays being around the corner, there's going to be many new and current players alike buying Auric cells and buying new survivors and chapters in DBD. So I thought it would be a good time to make this video and help you guys decide which survivors you should be buying, and once you do buy them, which ones you should level up first. The reason prestiging a specific survivor is important is because it gets their 3 teachable perks onto every other survivor in the game. Prestiging itself is pretty simple. All you have to do is get up to level 50 on that character's blood webs, and once you get to prestige 1, it gets that character's 3 teachable perks level 1 on every other survivor. And then the same thing follows with prestige 2 and 3. So if you prestige 2, it'll get that survivor's teachable perks level 2 on everybody, and then the level 3 perks will be when prestige 3 happens. So just to quickly explain how the tiering in this video is going to work, I'm first going to be splitting up the teachable perks into 4 categories. They're either going to be great, good, meh, or bad perks. And obviously there's a ton of things going into this, whether you have a specific play style, if you're in solo queue or swift, but I just rated these perks on a general consensus on what the community would believe that specific perk is rated. And now going on to the tiering for each category of survivors, it'll go from S to F tier. So S will be the best tier, and obviously F will be the worst tier. So you're going to want to prestige the people in S tier first and then F tier last. So in the S tier, these are characters that out of their 3 teachable perks, 2 or more of them are considered great. In A tier, only 1 of their teachable perks are great. In B tier, they have 1 good perk and the rest of the perks are meh. In C tier, 1 perk is good and the rest are bad. In D tier, all of the perks are meh. And finally in F tier, all of the perks are bad. And each row will also be going in order from left to right with best to worst. So the leftmost character in that tier is the best, and then the rightmost is the worst in that tier. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the tier list. Starting in F tier, we have Nick, Jane, Ellen, and Ada. All of these characters have pretty bad perks. With Ada, out of her 3 teachables of wiretap, reactive healing, and low profile is probably the best one. With Ellen, out of chemical trap, light-footed, and lucky star, light-footed is probably the best one. With Jane, out of solidarity, poised, and head-on is probably the best one. And with Nick, out of dramaturgy, scene partner, and plot twist, dramaturgy is probably the best one. You guys might think it's a hot take having Nick this far down. I do agree all 3 of his perks are fun, but they aren't particularly super useful. Moving on to D tier, we have Felix, Leon, Steve, Jake, Jill, Elodie, Ace, Cheryl, Yoichi, and Thalita. With Thalita, out of friendly competition, teamwork power of 2, and cut loose, the 1 meh perk is friendly competition. It's actually a pretty underrated gen progression perk that I really don't see in trials too often, but the rest of her perks are just not good. With Yoichi, out of parental guidance, empathic connection, and boon dark theory, parental guidance is the 1 meh perk he has. It's a pretty decent stealth perk that if you just quickly hide, you actually might be able to escape a few chases with, but the other 2 perks he has are just not good. With Cheryl, out of Soul Guard, Blood Pact, and Repressed Alliance, the 1 meh perk is Soul Guard. We aren't really in a hex meta anymore, so the really good part of being able to recover yourself unlimited times while being cursed doesn't happen too often, but being able to recover and have the endurance status effect can come in clutch sometimes, and her other 2 perks are just a little bit too situational to get value out of. With Ace, out of open-handed, up the ante, and Ace in the hole, the 1 meh perk is open-handed. On its own, it's useless, but pairing it with other aura reading perks, it extends the range of them, so it's a nice complementary perk to make already good aura reading perks even better. But the other 2 perks he has are just really bad, especially up the ante. It might be the most useless perk in the game, and as an Ace main, I wish I could put him all the way up number 1 in S tier, because if it was based on looks, Ace would be up there. With Elodie, out of Appraisal, Deception, and Power Struggle is the one meh perk. It's extremely situational, but it's super fun and it's super awesome to be able to stun yourself out of a killer's grasp, and it's actually pretty game changing if you can get that pallet stun down. And her other two perks aren't the worst bad perks, but they are very situational and don't get a ton of value if you don't make builds around them. With Jill, out of Counterforce, Resurgence, and Blast Mine, her one meh perk is Counterforce. It's pretty situational, but being able to cleanse all the totems really fast and being able to see one after the other can be pretty useful, whether it's for tome challenges or if you're trying to get rid of some hexes around the map. And everybody in the comments might grill me for me saying Blast Mine is bad. It is a super fun perk, but it doesn't really have any good value outside of the fun factor, so her other two perks aren't very good. With Jake, out of Iron Will, Calm Spirit, and Saboteur, his one meh perk is Iron Will. If I had done this tier list a few years ago, Jake would have been way up there because Iron Will used to be really good, but now it is not so good at all. It still has its pretty decent stealth value if you run it on its own without exhaustion perks, but that's it. And his other two perks are almost too situational to be considered anything better than bad, but they are by no means the worst perks in the bad tier. With Steve, out of Babysitter, Camaraderie, and Second Wind, there's actually two meh perks in Babysitter and Second Wind. Babysitter is actually a super underrated altruism perk after you're unhooked, which can really save you and the unhooked survivor from running into the killer or just outrunning them with the additional haste. And Second Wind is also another perk I really don't see too often, but it's pretty convenient, allowing you to just heal yourself for free after an unhook if you had just healed someone prior. And Camaraderie is just unfortunately a bad perk, especially with the anti-face camp mechanic now being in the game. With Leon, out of Bite the Bullet, Flashbang, and Rookie Spirit, his two meh perks are Bite the Bullet and Flashbang. Bite the Bullet is actually a pretty decent stealth perk if you're running a med kit or another heal perk. If you just go and hide and start healing, you'll be completely silent and super hard to find from the killer's POV. And Flashbang, it's kind of up to you whether you think this is a meh perk or not, but using flashbangs is pretty fun, and the fact that you can blind the killer and get saves with it, I think does make it a step up from bad into meh. And Rookie Spirit is just an awful perk, so we won't even talk about that one. And finally, with Felix, out of Visionary, Desperate Measures, and Built to Last, his two meh perks are Desperate Measures and Built to Last. Desperate Measures is also a very underrated altruism perk that allows you to really speed up your actions and clutch up with unhooks and heals when it's really needed, but I would only consider it meh, not good, because it does only get its value when people are struggling in the trial. And Built to Last is basically an infinite money glitch when it comes to items, but at the end of the day, this is also situational because it's not really super useful to just be replenishing the charges of a common toolbox you found in the trial. It's really only good if you're bringing in a really good item with it. And then Visionary is just plain awful, so again, we won't talk about that one. Moving on to the C tier, we have Adam, Yunjin, Jonah, Vittorio, Renato, Gabriel, and Hattie. With Hattie, out of Inner Focus, Residual Manifest, and Overzealous, Overzealous is her one good perk. If you stay away from the killer and you're just working on gens all trial, if you had Cleanse a Totem, you're gonna be flying through those gens, especially if it was a Hex Totem. So this is actually a very slept on gen progression perk. And then her other two perks are just plain bad. With Gabriel, out of Troubleshooter, Made for This, and Scavenger, his one good perk is Made for This. He would be in a much different tier even if it was a month ago, because Made for This was arguably the best survivor perk in the game, but now it is not that. It's only good. If you do make a build around it that can get you the Mended status effect, it can still get its old value, but you do need to make a build around it, which is why it's gone from great to good. And his other two perks we're not even going to talk about because they've always been bad. With Renato, out of Background Player, Blood Rush, and Teamwork Collective Stealth, his one good perk is Background Player. Similar to Gabriel, if this video was made even a month ago, he would be in a completely different tier, but instead of being way higher, he'd be way lower because Background Player just got a buff that made it from honestly bad to good. You're literally able to become the Flash with Background Player now, which is really clutch to try and get pallet saves and flashlight saves. And his other two perks have also been pretty bad since launch, or just too situational, so we're not going to talk about them. With Vittorio, out of Potential Energy, energy, Fogwise, and quick gambit, his one good perk is Fogwise. If you're great at hitting great skill checks, you're basically going to be able to have wall hacks on the killer at all times, which could be super good in solo queue, but even better in Swifts, and just being able to communicate to all of your friends where the killer is at all times. And you could argue that potential energy might be meh, but it's too situational and you're just better off working on the gen, so I would consider that pretty bad. And quick gambit is also much too situational to not be bad. With Jonah, out of overcome, corrective action, and boon exponential, the one good perk is overcome. In the grand scheme of things, this is probably the worst exhaustion perk there is, but all the exhaustion perks are very solid, and overcome, although it isn't the flashiest, will always get consistent value. You don't have to go out of your way to use this, it just gets used automatically. So if you just want bare bones distance, overcome has got you covered, and his other two perks are just way too situational. Corrective action is awful, and exponential, you'll get a recovery once in a blue moon, so it's pretty bad. With Yun Jin, out of fast track, smash hit, and self-preservation, her one good perk is smash hit. Smash hit did get a buff, and you can basically now get it every single chase because its exhaustion cooldown is so short, and the fact that it does give you 1 extra second of speed over the other exhaustion perks, it makes it so that basically every time you activate this perk by stunning the killer, you're gonna get a free chase escape. And her other two perks, his values just aren't really solid at all, so they're pretty bad. And finally, with Adam, out of diversion, deliverance, and autodidact, the one good perk is deliverance. Being able to unhook yourself can be very useful and save time for the other survivors to not need to come get you, or if they can't get you at all, it can be really clutch in turning the tides of the trial. But most of the time with this perk, you'll get hit with the deliverance curse and not get a hook in time before you get hooked, or a survivor will just simply come and unhook you before you can even unhook yourself. So that's why it's not great, but just good. And his other two perks, you could argue, are meh, but in my opinion, diversion is just a meme perk. And autodidact, unless you're a walking medkit and all you do is heal in the trial, the slow skill checks will slow you down more than once you gain the fast ones. So I think they're both pretty bad. Moving on to B tier, we have Michaela, Naya, Nancy, Quentin, Rebecca, Yui, Ash, and Tap. With Tap, his one good perk is Stakeout, his one meh perk is Detective's Hunch, and his one bad perk is Tenacity. Stakeout is a very consistent perk that will allow you to gen progress a lot faster, especially if you're pairing it with other perks like Hyperfocus, for example. So it's overall just a very good combo perk that pairs well with a lot of different perks. Detective's Hunch allows you to see a bunch of items around the trial, but in my opinion, that isn't really a super good value, because at the end of the day, if you do want to see things around the trial, you can just run a map or just pay attention long enough and you'll be able to find what you need. But it does have its value sometimes, which is why it's meh, not bad. And Tenacity is just an extremely situational perk that outside of a power struggle build, it's pretty bad. With Ash, his one good perk is Buckle Up, his one meh perk is Flip Flop, and his one bad perk is Medal of Man. He would have been much lower in the tier list had it been a few months ago before the Buckle Up buff, but Buckle Up is a good perk now in allowing you and the survivor you recover to have the endurance status effect, which makes it so that the killer is in a lose-lose situation whoever they go for after you recover, because they won't be able to down either of them in the next 10 seconds. Flip Flop is a meh perk because unlike Tenacity, it isn't just useful in a power struggle build. Flip Flop could also just get you a free wiggle out, even if the killer just waits a few seconds to pick you up. And you might argue that Medal of Man could be good or meh, but I just think you need too many protection hits in order to get one free one, so I don't think it's good at all, and I think it's just bad. With Yui, her one good perk is Lucky Break, her one meh perk is Any Means Necessary, and her one bad perk is Breakout. Yui also would have been much lower had it been before Lucky Break's buff, but Lucky Break did get buff and you can recharge it, so anytime you do have this active and you get hit, you basically turn invisible and you can guarantee yourself a chase escape, which is really clutch. And Any Means Necessary after its buff also went from bad to meh because you have no cooldown on when you can use it, and you actually farm blood points by just spam dropping and lifting back up the pallet, which is also kind of fun. And Breakout, you could argue, is meh. It's probably one of the best bad perks in DBD, but it's just much too situational in my opinion to be considered meh. With Rebecca, her one good perk is Hyperfocus, Hyperfocus, her one meh perk is Reassurance, and her one bad perk is Better Than New. Hyperfocus is really great if you're great at skill checks because it lets you fly through gens if you stack up the Hyperfocus stacks, and it becomes a great perk if you make an entire build around it, like for example, like I mentioned, comboing it with Stakeout, which allows you to get free great skill checks, and then makes it turn into a good Genrush build. Which, by the way, if you want to see a really good Hyperfocus Genrush build, there's gonna be a link in the description to a build that I made about a year ago with this, and it'll be in the top right now. Reassurance did used to be a good perk, but with the introduction of the anti-face camp mechanic, it's now a meh perk, because if you just leave a survivor that's getting face camp, they'll be able to unhook themselves eventually. And then Better Than New, you could argue this is meh, but the fact that it doesn't give bonus gen progression, I think is just bad. With Quentin, his one good perk is Vigil, his one meh perk is Wake Up, and his one bad perk is Pharmacy. Vigil is actually an extremely slept on perk just for the fact that you're able to recover your exhaustion that much faster. So combining this with any exhaustion perk will allow you to use that even more, and you're able to recover from all other negative status effects that much faster, and any teammate next to you recovers that faster as well, which is pretty solid. Wake Up is also another really underrated perk. You might think that you won't get value out of it a lot, which is why it's only meh, but when you do get value out of it, it'll seem like the best perk in the world, and it really does mean the difference between getting stuck in the trial and escaping the trial. And Pharmacy, unless you're trying to get green med kits, it's just plain bad. With Nancy, her one good perk is Inner Strength, her one meh perk is Fixated, and her one bad perk is Better Together. With Inner Strength, it's probably one of the better healing perks in the game, and it allows you to just basically get one free heal whenever you want if you just cleanse a totem prior. And then Fixated, a lot of people think is bad, but the fact that you're able to see your own scratch marks can lead to you being able to know if you're okay to hide from the killer or if you have to keep running. And the fact that you can walk faster is also pretty slept on in being able to be a lot stealthier. And then Better Together, I just do not think it's a good perk either. With Naya, her one good perk is Balanced Landing, her one meh perk is Streetwise, and her one bad perk is Urban Evasion. Some people might argue that Balanced Landing is a great perk, but I'm honestly just a Balanced Landing hater, and I think out of the main exhaustion perks, it's probably one of the worser ones, because sometimes finding high ground in a chase puts you in a bad spot and you don't get value out of it. But at the end of the day, it is one of the classic exhaustion perks that does get solid value, so it is good. And Streetwise is a perk that I also don't really see too often, and it does extend the duration of the item that you're using, but I think the best part about it is that it also extends the use of the survivors around you and their items. But it is only meh, because unless you're bringing a really good item, it isn't really that good of value. And then finally, Urban Evasion, you could argue is meh, but I just think it's bad. I don't think you need to be crouching faster in order to be stealthy. And then finally with Michaela, her one good perk is Boon Circle of Healing, her one meh perk is Boon Shadow Step, and her one bad perk is Clairvoyance. If you do want to get boon perks, you're best off getting Michaela, because she is the only character that has two boon perks, and she does happen to have the best one, which is Boon Circle of Healing. She would have been way higher if it was before the Boon Circle of Healing nerf, but Circle of Healing still is the best boon perk in allowing everybody in the trial to converge together and heal each other a lot faster in that aura. And in my opinion, she also has the second best boon perk in Shadow Step. It isn't always useful, which is why it isn't good. It's only meh, but in the situations where you're facing a killer that is only relying on scratch marks, for example, it can be pretty good, so it does have its value sometimes. And in my opinion, Clairvoyance is just plain bad. Moving on to A tier, we have Cade, Serena, Bill, Quanette, David, Jeff, and Lori. With Jeff, out of Breakdown, Aftercare, and Distortion, his one great perk is Distortion. Distortion, in my opinion, is probably one of the most criminally underrated perks in all of DBD. It lets you stay hidden whenever the killer tries to read your aura, which could mean the difference between the killer starting a chase with you or not. And I think the best part about it is that if you're able to recognize what aura reading perk triggered your Distortion, it'll make it so that you'll know exactly what the killer perks they're running. And his other two perks, I'm not going to talk about because I just don't think they're good. With Lori, out of Soul Survivor, Decisive Strike, and Object of Obsession, her one great perk is Decisive Strike. Had this been a few years ago, she probably would have been one of the best characters to buy, because Object of Obsession was really good, and so is DS, but both of these perks have been nerfed, and some people would argue that Decisive Strike is only good and not great, but I still think the fact that you can just escape the killer's grasp if you're getting tunneled, it will buy you an extra time in chase, and I think it is a pretty solid value perk. And her other two perks are just plain bad, so we won't talk about them. With David, out of Dead Hard, No Mither, and We're Gonna Live Forever, his one great perk is No Mither. I'm just kidding, it's Dead Hard. Similar to Lori, if it had been a few years ago before the We're Gonna Live Forever and Dead Hard nerfs, he actually probably would have been the best survivor to buy, but both of those perks did get a nerf, and some could argue that Dead Hard is good, but I still think it's really great for two reasons. You're still able to buy yourself time and chase when you do get value out of it, and being able to get basically an extra life in chase. And the fact that no killer really expects anybody to have Dead Heart anymore makes it so that you're going to be able to pull it off a lot more often. And We're Gonna Live Forever used to be a fantastic perk, but without blood points, it sucks. And No Mither is No Mither, so it's pretty bad. With Claudette, she has one great perk in Empathy, one good perk in Botany Knowledge, and one bad perk in Self-Care. Empathy isn't as great as the other great perks following it, but the fact that she also has a good perk along in her kit makes her a more worthwhile prestige than the other ones before her. Empathy, I think, is, in my opinion, the best aura rating perk in the game, because whenever a survivor gets injured, you basically get to see them wherever they are in the map, so you can go over to them to heal them. The best part about it is that if you see a survivor appear just going from healthy to injured, you obviously know that they're in the chase, and you'll know exactly where the killer is while they're in that chase. And Botany Knowledge, you could even argue, is a great perk. It's at the very top of good, in my opinion. It's just a very consistent perk that allow you to heal yourself and everybody else in the trial that much faster. And finally, there's gonna be a lot of people in the comments that are arguing that Self-Care is a good perk or it's a meh perk, but in my opinion, Empathy in its current state heals much too slow to be anything but bad. With Bill, he has one great perk in Unbreakable, one good perk in Borrowed Time, and one bad perk in Left Behind. Unbreakable is a really clutch perk. If the killer just straight up slugs, you're able to recover yourself if nobody can come back to get you, or you're just able to recover that much faster, which if a survivor comes over to try and heal you, those extra seconds could mean the difference between getting picked up or just running away. Bill also probably would have been much higher had it been before base get Borrowed Time, but Borrowed Time still is a good perk in and of itself because it just extends the base get Borrowed Time, which no killer ever expects anymore. And finally, Left Behind is probably one of the best perks in the bad tier, but it's just so situational that if you're not looking for hatch, it's just useless. With Zarina, she has one great perk in Off the Record, one good perk in For the People, and one bad perk in Red Herring. Off the Record is, in my opinion, the best non-exhaustion perk in DBD. It gets such consistent value, and it literally gives you an extra life in chase after every single unhook. And for a cherry on top, it also allows you to not get your aura red at all while it's active, so it allows you to just be able to stay stealthy as well. So it's just a fantastic perk. For the People is a good perk. I'm kind of a hater of it, but I can't argue that being able to instantly recover someone or instantly heal someone can be really clutch. And if you do make a whole build around For the People with Buckle Up, for example, it can really turn into a great perk. And finally, Red Herring, Flip Flop, fishy bad. I don't like it. And finally, with Kate, she has one great perk in Windows Opportunity, and her other two perks with Boil Over and Dance With Me are both good. Windows Opportunity isn't the greatest perk in the A tier, but the fact that she also has two good perks to go along with her kit makes her a much better buy than everybody else in that A tier. Windows Opportunity, you could argue, is the best information perk in DBD. It allows you to just loop that much better and chain every window together with another palette when you're going from loop to loop. And Boil Over, you could argue, is meh, but you get such good consistent value that you're bound to get some free wiggle outs, especially if you're getting down on high ground that the killer has to jump off of. And finally, Dance With Me is also another consistent good value perk that will allow you to avoid scratch marks whenever you vault, which can really confuse the killer and buy you even more time and chase. Finally, moving on to S tier, we have Meg, Dwight, and Fang. Fang has 2 great perks in Lithe and Alert and 1 bad perk in Technician. Lithe is the better of the 2 great perks. It's my favorite exhaustion perk and my favorite perk in the entire game. It's a super solid exhaustion perk that you basically get to control when you get the value out of by simply vaulting. Whether you're at a window or a drop pallet, you're gonna be able to find those all over the map, so you'll always be able to get value out of this in Chase. And Alert is probably the best killer information perk in the game, where you basically just get to randomly see the killer whenever they break a pallet or a door, which can give you really solid information on where the killer is where you wouldn't have known otherwise. And finally, Technician. Please don't run this perk, it's really bad. With Dwight, he has 2 great perks in Bond and Prove Thyself and 1 good perk in Leader. Although I do think that Lithe with Fang is better than any of the 2 great perks that Dwight has, the fact that his 3rd perk is good and not bad makes him a better prestige than Fang. Prove Thyself is the better of the 2 great perks, and it used to be even better before its nerf, but it still is an extremely solid, and it's probably still the best gen progression in all of DBD. And Bond is probably the most consistent aura reading perk in DBD, because you'll always be able to see the survivors that are near you regardless of if they're injured or healthy, like with Empathy. So you'll always be able to see them and see survivors they can meet up with to do gens and see if they're in a chase near you. And finally, Leader, I also think is a pretty slept on perk, because Dwight's other 2 perks kind of overshadow this one, but it is very consistent value if you're hanging around survivors a lot and allowing them to do exit gates faster, allowing to heal faster. And finally, Meg is the best survivor to prestige. You should definitely prestige her first, and she's free, so she should honestly be the survivor that you start out with if you're brand new to DBD, because she has 3 great perks. Her best perk is definitely Sprint Burst, and it's arguably the best not only exhaustion perk in DBD, but the best perk in all of DBD. It's such a consistent exhaustion perk. You'll always be able to get the guaranteed head start in a chase. You can also use this outside of chase to travel around the map faster, so it's just a fantastic must-have perk. And Adrenaline is also a super clutch endgame perk. If you guys have been watching me for a really long time, you know that I've been an Adrenaline hater for the longest time, but I gotta give it its flowers. In endgame, it can mean the difference between dying and escaping, so it's probably the best endgame perk in DBD. And finally, Quick and Quiet, similar to Dwight's Leader, it gets overshadowed by Meg's other 2 perks, but I also think it's probably one of the worser great perks in DBD, but it is still a great perk because it is such consistent and solid value. Having 1 silent vault in a chase can really throw off the killer and could even lead to you completely hiding and escaping the chase. So yeah guys, that was the tier list of which survivor you should prestige first in DBD. Just to quickly recap, the survivors in S tier should be the ones that you unlock first. Since Meg and Dwight are free, I think you should start with maining Meg if you're a beginner, then prestige Dwight, and then if you're on console, get Fang. But if you are on PC and you don't have Fang for free, Fang should be your first purchase. And after that, it's really up to you based on your playstyle, what perks you want, like which great perks or which good perks you want. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and make sure to comment down below who you think is the survivor you should buy first. That could definitely help out the other people watching this video that are looking to buy a new survivor. So yeah guys, that's been the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you're new. This has been Sharpshot, and I will see you guys in the next video.